Welcome to the Darkling Radio, your home for spine-chilling horror stories, true and fictional, designed to keep you on the edge of your seat. Immerse yourself in terrifying tales, narrated for maximum suspense and thrills. When Elena moved into her grandmother's old house, she never expected to find a mirror that watched her, but as shadows lengthened and whispers filled the air, she realized she wasn't just staring at her reflection, something else was staring back, and it knew her name. With her friend Marcus caught in the first horrifying glimpse, their lives would never be the same again. I had never cared much about the old mirror in my grandmother's attic. It was tall, with an ornate wooden frame carved in twisting patterns that looked like tangled vines, and it was covered in a thick layer of dust that made it almost impossible to see my reflection clearly. I only noticed it that day because I was searching for old boxes of photographs, hoping to find something that told me more about my family's past. The attic smelled of mildew and old wood, and the sunlight that filtered through the grimy window barely reached the corners, leaving long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist. When I finally brushed away the dust, the glass gleamed faintly, and I froze for a moment, staring at the vague, distorted reflection. It wasn't me I was worried about seeing, though. It was the way the room behind me seemed different, warped, like the angles of the attic had stretched and bent while I wasn't looking. I shook my head and told myself it was just the light, just the way the sun hit the glass. I leaned closer, my fingers brushing the cool surface, and for a fleeting second, I thought I saw a movement behind me, not my own, but something else. My heart skipped a beat, and I spun around. Nothing, only the old boxes stacked haphazardly and the faint trail of dust I had disturbed. When I turned back to the mirror, the movement was there again, just on the edge of perception, a shadow shifting too deliberately to be caused by the wind. I stumbled back, breathing fast, trying to tell myself it was a trick of the light or my imagination. But the deeper I looked into the glass, the more I felt that the attic itself had changed. The shadows were darker, the corners longer, and the air heavier, almost like it was pressing against my skin. I could see a figure now, faint but unmistakable, standing just behind where I should have been. It wasn't completely solid, more of a silhouette with jagged edges, yet it felt overwhelmingly real. It was smiling, a slow, deliberate curve of the lips that made something inside me curl with fear. I blinked, and when I opened my eyes, it was gone. But my gut told me it hadn't moved at all. It had just waited until I was certain it had disappeared. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Every creak of the old house made me flinch. Every shadow seemed too sharp, too deliberate, and every reflection I caught in the windows or the polished floors made my stomach tighten. At night, I lay awake, unable to shake the feeling that something was watching, waiting, smiling just behind my back. I tried to tell myself it was all imagination, that mirrors had always played tricks on me in dim light, but that didn't stop the fear from gnawing at my mind. Later that evening, I went to my bedroom and, on a whim, checked my phone's front camera. My heart froze. I wasn't alone. In the blurred corner of the reflection, a shadowy figure knelt. Its head was tilted unnaturally, just like the one in the attic. I didn't dare turn around. I stared at the screen, unable to move, and the figure remained unmoving, but present, watching me. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I felt paralyzed, caught between disbelief and terror. I finally managed to lie down in bed, pulling the blankets close around me, but the fear didn't fade. Every reflective surface in the room, the glass of the window, the tiny mirror on the dresser, even the darkened screen of my phone seemed alive, almost taunting me. I could sense it moving in those surfaces, just out of direct sight. It was patient, waiting for me to lower my guard. Hours later, when I finally felt my eyes begin to close, I felt a cold breath brushing against my neck. I froze, heart hammering, knowing that there was nothing in the room that could have caused it. The shadow in the mirror wasn't just a trick of light or dust, it was present. And in that moment, lying there in the suffocating darkness, I understood something I didn't want to admit. The mirror in the attic wasn't ordinary. Whatever I had glimpsed in its glass was alive, and it was aware of me. The chill lingered long after the breath passed, seeping into my bones. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about the figure kneeling behind me, the slow, deliberate smile, and the impossibly empty eyes that seemed to pierce through the very air around me. Every reflection in the house became a trap, every glint of glass a potential doorway for that thing. I lay awake, too terrified to move, too terrified to look, knowing that something had attached itself to me that night, watching, waiting, and learning. And I knew, with an unsettling certainty, that this was only the beginning. The next morning I tried to convince myself that what I had seen in the attic was a trick of my tired mind. Sunlight poured through the windows, warm and ordinary, and for a moment it felt like nothing had happened. Maybe it was just shadows, just my imagination. But when I went upstairs to the attic, the mirror was different. The dust I had wiped away the day before was back, thick and undisturbed, as if I had never touched it. I leaned closer, my reflection flickering across the glass, and that shadowy figure was there again, closer this time. Its outline was sharper, its presence undeniable. It wasn't just behind. MIT seemed almost pressed up against the glass, staring directly at me with eyes that were empty hollows. I wanted to run, but something routed me to the spot. Its smile was slow, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. I had the irrational urge to reach out, to touch it again, and see if it would react. My fingers brushed the cold surface of the mirror, and the figure's smile widened, unnaturally stretching across the faint shape of its face. I jumped back, tripping over a loose floorboard, my heart racing, telling myself to leave, to never come back. But curiosity was stronger than fear. I couldn't stop thinking about it, couldn't stop feeling that it was calling me, whispering without sound, just drawing me closer to the attic, closer to the mirror. That night, sleep became impossible. I couldn't bear to look in mirrors, couldn't let the light from my phone illuminate any reflective surface. Even in the dark, I felt watched. The shadows in my room shifted subtly, and my own reflection, or what should have been my reflection, seemed wrong. My movements felt delayed, like the image in the mirror wasn't syncing with me. Every glance was a test, a subtle change in my hair, my eyes, my expression, a hint that the figure behind the glass was learning, adapting. In a half-conscious panic, I started covering every reflective surface in my room. The mirrors were draped in sheets, the windows darkened with curtains, the screens turned off. But no matter what I did, I could feel it. It was there, always, in the edges of my vision, in the shifting shadows, in the still air, and sometimes, just before I would fall asleep, I would see its eyes reflected somewhere faint, far away, and a shiver would crawl down my spine. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, that fear was creating patterns where none existed. But then the whispering began. It was faint at first, just a flutter at the edge of hearing, like wind through a crack in the window, but I recognized it was coming from the mirror. Not the mirror in the attic I had been near it, but the lingering presence seemed to echo through every reflective surface in the house. I couldn't understand the words at first, just faint syllables brushing my mind. Then it became clear. Look closer. The words weren't spoken. They didn't vibrate through the air. They pressed directly against my thoughts. Soft and invasive. Impossible to ignore. My mind screamed at me to resist, to stay away, but my body moved before I could stop it. I found myself drawn toward the bathroom mirror, toward the window pane, toward any glimmer that could reflect me back. I leaned closer, staring into the faint reflection, heart hammering, unable to turn away. And then I saw it. My reflection blinked first. My eyes had been wide and still, and then, almost impossibly, the image in the glass moved. A deliberate blink, not in sync with me, but on its own. Panic seized me. My stomach lurched. My reflection wasn't mimicking me. It was alive, aware, and doing things I wasn't. I stumbled back from the mirror, nearly knocking over the sink. My hands shook, and I tried to tell myself it was impossible. Mirrors don't move. Reflections don't have minds of their own. But I knew the truth in my gut, the primal certainty that this thing was no longer a simple shadow or trick of light. It was learning, growing, adapting. The night stretched endlessly. I could feel it hovering in the corners of every reflective surface, pressing at my mind, whispering, taunting, teaching me an invisible lesson I didn't want to learn. And when I finally forced my eyes closed, trembling under the weight of my fear, I felt it again, the slow, deliberate brushing of something cold, almost wet, against my neck. A reminder that the mirror was not just glass, it was alive, and it was watching. I realized then that avoiding the mirrors would not be enough. It had reached beyond the attic, beyond the house, beyond the simple boundaries of reality. And I understood, with a sinking, suffocating certainty, that it wasn't going to stop. It was waiting, and it had just begun. I stopped going into the attic entirely. The thought of facing that mirror, that figure, made my chest tighten and my hands shake. I tried to avoid every reflective surface in the house, covering mirrors with sheets, turning my phone face down, drawing curtains over the windows. I thought if I couldn't see it, it couldn't reach me. But the figure didn't need mirrors to follow. I began noticing it everywhere, in places I shouldn't have been able to see it. The dark stain on the carpet in the living room seemed to shift slightly whenever I looked away. The corner of the hallway felt heavier, almost tangible. And sometimes, when I passed a window, I glimpsed a shadow that didn't match my movement. It wasn't mimicking me anymore, it was leading me. I became obsessed. Every reflective surface became a test, a puzzle I had to solve just to prove I was still in control. I would trace my hand along a mirror, watching to see if the image followed. It never did. It always did something slightly wrong, a finger stretching too long, an eye narrowing at the wrong angle, a smile too wide, too slow, and that difference was enough to make my blood run cold. I realized with a creeping horror that it wasn't just watching MIT, was studying me, learning me, waiting for the perfect moment. One morning I woke to a message scratched into the condensation on my bedroom mirror, although I hadn't taken a shower, and the air hadn't been humid enough to form such patterns. My pulse raced as I read the words, "You can't leave." My mind refused to accept it at first. Someone had to be playing a cruel trick, but the house was empty, silent, and the oppressive weight in the room told me otherwise. The figure had found a way to communicate without mirrors, or perhaps it had never needed them at all. From that moment, I couldn't ignore it. I tried to sleep, tried to eat, tried to act normally, but the sensation of being watched was relentless. Shadows stretched unnaturally, objects seemed to shift just out of the corner of my eye, and every surface reflected something wrong. My own reflection became unpredictable. Sometimes it lagged behind my movements, sometimes it moved independently, raising a hand I hadn't lifted, tilting its head in a way I hadn't. It was as if I was no longer the one in control of my own image. The figure's presence became overwhelming, an inescapable pressure in my mind. I stopped speaking, stopped making unnecessary sounds, convinced that even a whisper might draw its attention. But no matter how careful I was, I could feel it getting closer, a slow, deliberate crawling sensation that pressed against my senses. It was patient, immensely patient. It didn't need to scare me immediately. It could wait, watch, and torment me silently for as long as it wanted. Then one night I noticed the shift. My reflection in the tiny warped window at the end of the hallway wasn't moving in sync with me. Its eyes, hollow and dark, stared directly into mine, and a smile slowly spread across its face. My own lips stayed still, but the figure grinned as though mocking me, as though it had been waiting my entire life for this moment. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, unable to look away. It wasn't a reflection anymore. It was a presence, something separate from me, something that had learned to inhabit my world without permission. That night, I woke to find the mirror from the attic missing. The empty space against the wall should have been a relief, but it wasn't. On my pillow lay a shard of glass, small and sharp, reflecting only a fragment of my face. I didn't dare touch it. In the corner of my vision, I saw the familiar shadow kneeling, waiting, its grin impossibly wide. I could feel it studying me, patient and relentless. I realized with dread that it had spread, that it no longer needed the attic or the original mirror. Its reach was infinite, extending into every reflective surface, into every shadow, into the air itself. Sleep became a distant memory. Every night, the shadows pressed closer, every reflection teased and tormented me, and somewhere deep in my mind, I knew that the thing in the mirror had one purpose: to replace me, not physically perhaps, but in every way that mattered, to inhabit my life, my movements, my existence. And one day, I realized it would succeed. The shard of glass on my pillow caught the moonlight just slightly, glinting like a tiny, malevolent eye. And for the first time I understood that it wasn't waiting to scare me anymore. It was waiting to take me completely. Sleep had long abandoned me. Nights stretched endlessly, each hour heavier than the last, filled with shadows that seemed to twist and grow in the corners of my vision. The house felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves had been bent inward by some unseen force. I avoided mirrors and reflective surfaces whenever possible, but it was no longer enough. The figure from the attic had spread its reach, moving through every reflective plane, appearing in places I knew it shouldn't. Even the darkened screen of my laptop or the black glass of a turned-off TV held its presence, watching, waiting, whispering without sound. I could feel it everywhere, a cold, oppressive weight that pressed against my mind, bending my thoughts into fear. At first it was subtle, a flicker in the corner of my eye, a shift in the shadows, but gradually it became impossible to ignore. Shapes moved where no shapes should be, dark forms bending reality ever so slightly, enough to make me doubt everything I saw. I became obsessive, scanning every surface, tracing every shadow, convinced that if I didn't, it would move closer, take more. One night, the lights in my room flickered, a stuttering rhythm that set my nerves on edge. The shadows elongated across the walls, curling and twisting unnaturally. That's when I noticed something I had never dared to see before. My reflection wasn't alone. A second face hovered just behind mine in the mirror, pale and hollow-eyed, its grin impossibly wide. It leaned closer, whispering my name silently, the air around me chilling with a cold wind that carried no explanation. My hands shook, my breath caught, and I realized I could not move. I was paralyzed by the sight, rooted to the spot, staring at my own reflection while something else stared back from behind me. I tried to back away, but the floor felt sticky, heavy, resisting every movement. My reflection raised a finger and pointed directly at me. Not mimicking me, not shadowing me, but commanding me. Panic surged, and I stumbled backward, crashing into the bed. My heart pounded and the room seemed impossibly still, the air thick with some malevolent expectation. The whispering continued, low and soft, just at the edge of my hearing, but unmistakably there. "You're mine now." I realized with a sinking dread that it didn't just want to scare me, it wanted me to obey. It wanted me to understand my place, trapped under its control. Every reflective surface in the house became a conduit for its presence. I no longer saw my own movements reflected correctly. They were delayed, twisted, distorted, as if it were practicing, testing, learning how to replace me. I could feel it brushing against my mind, probing, patient and unrelenting. Days blurred into nights. I stopped leaving my room, stopped speaking, stopped eating, convinced that any action might draw its attention. Even when I closed my eyes, I could see its hollow stare behind my eyelids, the faint outlines of its grin etched into my vision, refusing to leave. I began to wonder if it had always been inside the house, just waiting, patient as the walls grew older, waiting for someone foolish enough to notice it. Then came the moment that made me certain of its intentions. I had been leaning over the sink, trying to steady myself, when I saw my reflection twitched independently. My own lips stayed still, but the image in the glass grinned wider, a deliberate, slow motion that made my skin crawl. It wasn't mimicking me anymore. It was separate, alive, and it was learning to become me. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a ghost or a trick of the mind. It wasn't confined to a mirror or a piece of glass. It was a presence that could manipulate reflections, shadows, air itself, and it wanted to replace me, to inhabit my life, to step into my world while I was left trapped, helpless, and invisible. That night, I sat in the corner of my room, shivering, staring at the small shard of glass that had been left on my pillow weeks ago. In its surface, I could see the faint outline of a figure kneeling, waiting, patient and merciless. My own reflection stared back from the shard, pale and hollow, lips curled into the same slow, deliberate smile. And in that moment I understood the truth. It wasn't just following me anymore. It was inside me, inside every surface, every shadow, every reflection. I realized that I could not hide, I could not escape, and as I pressed my forehead against the shard, my heart pounding, I felt its cold presence brush my cheek, whispering once more, "You're mine." By the fifth night, I was beyond reasoning. Every moment of every day had become a struggle against the presence that had claimed my reflections. I no longer trusted my own eyes. Every dark corner, every shadow, every glint of light could be the figure, waiting, watching, learning. I had barricaded myself in the living room, covering every reflective surface I could reach, but I knew it was only a matter of time. It had grown beyond the confines of the attic, beyond mirrors, beyond my control. It was patient, cunning, and unstoppable. The air in the house was heavy, suffocating. The slightest movement made the shadows shift unnaturally. I could feel it pressing against me, lingering at the edge of my perception, teasing me. My own reflection had become unreliable. Sometimes it seemed to move before I did, anticipating my actions, learning the rhythm of my life. I could feel its eyes in the corners of every surface, every shadow, a presence I could neither see fully nor ignore. That night I knew I had to face it. I returned to the attic, my heart hammering in my chest, every step weighted with dread. The house was silent, but the silence itself felt wrong, thick and unnatural. The mirror leaned against the wall, still and unassuming, but I knew better. I approached it cautiously, my hands trembling as I reached out. The surface was cold, unnervingly so, almost alive under my fingers. And then I saw it not just a reflection, but something beyond. My own face stared back, wide-eyed and terrified, but behind it was another face, pale and hollow, grinning slowly, deliberately. I realized with a shiver that the figure had trapped me inside the mirror, or perhaps it had replaced me there entirely. I could see myself, screaming silently, watching the world from behind the glass, unable to move, unable to escape. The figure in the mirror stepped forward, not from behind the glass, but as if it had emerged from the reflection itself. Its presence filled the attic, overwhelming every sense. It moved with an unnatural grace, its eyes hollow yet aware, its grin impossibly wide. My body froze as it stepped closer, and I realized that this was no longer just a reflection. It was me, or rather, it was what had taken my place. I wanted to scream, to run, to fight, but the strength in my limbs had vanished. I was trapped in my own mind, forced to watch as it moved, as it studied the room I had once called safe. Every instinct screamed at me to resist, but I was powerless. And then I understood the horrifying truth. It didn't need to kill me. It didn't need to harm me physically. By replacing my reflection, it had already claimed me. My life, my identity, everything I had ever known, was now controlled by something else. I pressed my hands against the glass, feeling the cold bite into my skin. My trapped reflection mirrored the panic in my mind, silent and helpless, while the figure that had emerged stepped fully into the attic, smiling at me. It moved past me, brushing by as if I were nothing, a phantom of my former self. The room seemed to shift around it, the shadows bowing to its presence. I could feel the house itself acknowledging its dominion, the air growing heavier, almost suffocating, as it moved through the space. Time lost meaning. The figure's movements were deliberate and slow, each step a reminder that it had all the patience in the world. I realized then that it could follow me anywhere, into any reflective surface, across any distance. I could hide, barricade, cover mirrors, but it didn't matter. It was no longer bound by the glass. It existed wherever my reflection could exist. Wherever I might exist, it would be there first, waiting, watching, ready to step in. And then, before I could comprehend what was happening, it vanished, leaving only my trapped reflection staring back at me. The mirror fell silent, ordinary and still, as if nothing had happened, but I knew better. I was no longer alone in the house. My identity, my life, my very existence, had been split. Part of me remained trapped behind the glass, watching helplessly, while the figure roamed free in the world, indistinguishable from me, learning, blending, waiting for the moment to finish what it had started. When anyone later enters the attic, the mirror appears empty and unremarkable. Dust gathers in its corners. Sunlight glints off the glass, ordinary and mundane. But if you look closely, long enough, in the right light, you might catch a movement that isn't yours, a smile that lingers too long, eyes that hold nothing but hollow awareness. And if you see it, it is watching, because I am still there.